Hello and welcome to the channel. This week's video is going to be a little bit different. It's not going to be a podcast episode, and if you're new here, that's what would normally be in my videos, would be a knitting and crafting podcast. But because it's the beginning of the year, I decided this week's video is going to be a little bit different, and I'm going to do a make 9 of my knitting projects for 2022. It is 22, right? I think it is. So I'm going to show my top 9 projects I would like to get done knitting wise this year. There may be a few notable mentions at the end because whittling it down to 9 was really hard. Oh, my cat has just jumped up on something up there. I started off at 21. I managed to whittle it down to 18. Then I managed to figure out 9, but there is a few that I want to mention at the end as well. My criteria for my make 9 was I wanted to try and just include projects that I actually have the yarn for. Not necessarily bought the pattern for yet. Most of them I have. I think there's probably 1 or 2 that I haven't yet. But I do have the yarn for everything that I've chosen. So I'm going to pop up little photos somewhere around here of the project that I have in mind, and I will show you the yarns if I have them to hand. I think I have all of them that I plan to use for the project. Okay, first up we have the Cat Vent sweater, which is an all over colourwork sweater by I have my notes here, Marna Gilligan, and it is knit in a DK weight yarn, and the idea is that you use Advent minis in a DK weight to do a kind of fade through the body of the sweater, and then the sleeves and the neck, top of the neck, either a rib or a crew neck depending on which version you choose, and the rib, everything would be done in a contrast yarn. The original photographs and the original design was done in the designer's own Advent, hand-dyed Advent yarns that she has in her shop, and she has used grey for the contrast yarns. The yarns I decide I'm going to use are, I have a yarn Advent from a few years ago by Pixie Yarns, and it is a fingering weight. So what I plan to do is hold the yarn double. So I will, because I've caked these all up as centre pull cakes on my yarn ball wider caker, I can pull the yarn from both the inside and the outside of the skein and make it a DK weight. 1 or 2 of them I might hold 2 balls together, 2 different colours. So for example, there is some quite light ones up here in this corner, which with a contrast, yeah, see the Cat Vent sweater has 2 contrast colours. It has the colourwork contrast, which is kind of just an undyed yarn, and the contrast on the sleeves. But if I just hold a white undyed yarn with those, the colourwork's not going to show. So I might use, say, a pale one held with one that's very similar with a bit more colour in it, just so that the colourwork shows up a little better. So that will be what I use for the main fade. I'm going to have to adjust the light in here, just bear with me. We have a bit of a strange lighting situation today. It's very bright out there, but then we get rain and it's reflecting off the windows on the sun lounge. Plus I can't use my studio lights today because we have a power cut at the moment. It was a planned one. I believe one of the houses close by are having some work done, so we have no electric for the next few hours, so I'm having to just record without my lights, which would have been useful because that's reflecting and blinding me a bit. Anyway, the yarn I'm going to use for the sleeves and the neckline, I think I will do the cowl rib neckline, not sure yet, is this yarn. This is some of my own hand-dyed yarns. If you're new to the channel, I am a indie dyer and I own Mad Madamel yarns. But I'm going to use these yarns, but what I have in mind is these are like a light gold colour. They're a little bit brighter than they're showing on camera because the light is blowing it out a little bit. But I'm going to over dye these. They're kind of more like that. I'm going to over dye them to make them a little darker and more of a mustard colour, because I think a mustard yarn with these is going to look really rather nice. So that is the first of my Make 9 for 2022. The thing about the Make 9, which I find quite good, is it's not like a bingo or a competition as such. And I don't have any illusions that I will get all of these projects done this year, but it's kind of like your top ones you would like to get done. The last time I did a Make 9 a couple of years ago, I think I've done about 6 of the projects that's on there, and I think at least one of them is on my Make 9 for this year as well. So it's not so much a goal or a target so much as the ones you would really like and hope that you would have time to knit, if that makes sense. And that goes for sewing Make 9s or any other craft really. So the second design I would like to do this year is the Winter Wonder Shawl by Helen Stewart, I believe. Yes, Helen Stewart. And it is a fingering weight shawl with a triangle garter section and a lace panel at the bottom. And the lace panel at the bottom is supposed to have little seed beads where all the little interlacing crisscrossy bits are. But I am not going to use beads. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use this skein of hand spun yarn of my own, which is a kind of like a double gradient, and it is a spun from a braid rather of fibre that I bought from created by LCB, and it is called Snow Angels, and it was a one-of-a-kind skein, and it is a 50% merino, 50% tencel blend. So it's lovely and soft and silky shiny. And the yarn I'm going to use for the lace section, instead of using beads, is this skein of Stellina yarn, and this is by Old Maiden Aunt in the colourway Dreek, which is one of my favourite Scottish words. Today is not a Dreek day, it's pretty bright out there, but it keeps being showery. And it is nice and sparkly, and it is a cool bluey grey skein of yarn. I have 2 of these, and I'll only be using a small amount for this design, and the rest plus the other skein is for a different shawl sometime down the line. Next up we have a design that I don't have the yarn yet, only because it is in the post at the moment, so hopefully it will arrive very soon, and it is the Ichabod cardigan. I have already knit one of these before, and I knit this in a orange 100% alpaca, very Halloweeny, very pumpkiny, because it's inspired by Ichabod and Sleepy Hollow and such like. But I do like the shape of it, and I like the fit and the lines of it, so I want to knit at least one more of this. And the yarns I would like to use is the Harrisville Nightshades, I always forget that one, in the colourway Last Call, which is basically all the nightshade yarns are a black base with like kind of, I want to say tweedy flecks, but they're not really tweedy. They're more like they've got extra fibres in the ply in a contrast colour. So Last Call has like a light, what looks like almost a tealy blue. And you have other ones such as, I think the Cinder, which has like orange fibres in it and such like. And they do a Daylights range, which is basically a white base with little coloured flecks in it. I don't like the colours show up much, so much as give it a slight tint. Kind of like, I don't know if you're in the UK and you can get white paint. I don't know if you can still get it, but years ago you could get white paint that was sort of like apple white, which was white with an ever so slight tint of green, or I don't know, I can't think of any of the other ones off the top of my head, but you get the idea. The fibre base is in 80% Como, which is something you can't get in the UK. It's specific to America, but from what I understand is a cross between a Corriedale and Merino sheep, and you get this fibre. Now Merino is really, really soft. Corriedales are a little bit woollier, not scratchy, but it's certainly more of a woolly fibre than the really slick Merino. So I'm really interested to see what it comes out like. I have a cat that's climbing all over my bags of yarn right now. So that is the next one on my Make 9. Oh, and the Ichabod is designed by Andy Satterland, which I forgot to mention. I think I might end up making a third one of these. It's just the fit. It's really nice. It has a nice silhouette and such like. Maybe, I'm not sure what in yet, but it's definitely one of those patterns I really enjoyed making, and I really like the fit of. Next up is the Wild Posy Sweater by Melody Hoffman, and I really like this one. I don't like the yarn she used for it. The original design is knit in Plutalopi, which is one of the Icelandic Lopi yarns. It's an unspun yarn, kind of like a single ply yarn, but if you untwist it, basically, it hasn't been plied. It is very, very delicate. Not really a problem because I'm not a tight knitter. I would like to knit with it if it wasn't Icelandic wool, basically. I find Lopi very, very scratchy to me, and Icelandic wools in Iceland and any of traditionally it would be used as an outer garment wear sweater, so not something you would have against your skin. It is a rustic yarn. It is an outerwear sweater. It's something that it repels water quite well. Oh, obviously if you dunked yourself in the sea it wouldn't, but if you're in the rain it sheds water relatively well, and it's very warm, but it is very scratchy. Oh, I find it very scratchy. I have some of the chunky Lopi yarn, which I can remember the name of, but there's also Let Lopi, which is what people mostly think of with Lopi yarns, and the thought of having it anywhere near my skin or my neck or my wrists, or just one layer of fabric in between me, and it's just not going to happen. I would never wear it. My sister, she has a sweater knit in Let Lopi, and it is very much one of those ones you put on top of sort of like 3 t-shirts or a long sleeve top, and her partner's the same. You've got this outside sweater that you'd basically wear instead of a jacket. So what I decided to do is, because the Let Lopi is held, the Plutalopi rather, is held double to make the sweater, I'm going to use a softer yarn held single. And the yarn that I've chosen to use is Drops Air. Is it Drops Air? Yes, Drops Air, in the colourway Wheat, which is this nice kind of beigey, tonal beigey kind of yarn. And I think it will make a nice version of it. And I will hold it single and work out a good gauge for it, and at least it will be nice and soft and against skin soft, because Drops Air is an alpaca, I believe it's a baby alpaca blend base. Okay, I think I've temporarily fixed the sunlight problem by shutting the curtain halfway. Next up we have a pattern which has been in my queue and in my library, and I've had the yarn for several years now, which is the Hare and Tortoise Gauntlets by Kate Davies. I intend to knit this with Shetland, Jameson of Shetland Spindrift yarn in these colours, and the colours are, I can't remember what that one is, Esit, that's the beige one, oh God, goodness me, and Copper, and we have My Hair, we have Murret, and we have Old Gold, and these are very similar to the colours that the Gauntlets, the original pattern of the Gauntlet when it was released, the photos on the design are very similar to this, with the kind of burgundy and kind of dirty gold, and she has updated the pattern since then, and with new photos. I'm not so keen on the new colours she's used, which is kind of like blues and beiges, but I like the original, so I got yarns very similar from my local shop, because I live on the Orkney Islands, and the Orkney Islands is not that far from Shetland, so getting Shetland yarn is pretty easy in Orkney. Not as easy as it used to be, because we don't have as many wool shops, but yeah, Shetland yarn, fairly easy to get, and so that's what I'm using for that. Next up we have the Ibra, I'm not sure on the pronunciation, but the Ibra Sweater by Ellie of Skein Day Knits. I intend to knit a cardigan version of this, so I will be steeking this and knitting it very similar to the way I did my pumpkin yoked cardigan. Is that Oh My Gorgeous? I think that one was called, the sweater, and I steeked that one because it's it's a yoked sweater, round yoked sweater like the Svag is here, but it was a bit overly large and I didn't like the way it fit, so I steeked it basically from a sweater, and now I love it. I tend to reach for it quite a lot. It's nice and lightweight because it was knit in an alpaca based yarn, so I'm doing something very similar with the Ibra, steeking it, knitting it in an alpaca yarn, maybe ever so slightly smaller, less bulky, but in a very, very similar manner and a very similar base. So I'm going to be using Drops Flora from this, from my stash, my drop stash, and I will be knitting the main colour in number 3, which is this kind of pale neutral grey, and the contrast will most likely be in this mid grey, although I'm not 100% certain. I have a couple of other options for using up scraps of yarn for the colourwork, but we shall see. It will most likely be these two, and then I will have a colourwork grey sweater to be able to throw on over plain garments. Okay, now we have the Praline cardigan by Gudrun Johnson, and this one is one of her older patterns. I think it's around 10 years ago, this one, and I think it was in one of the Shetland Trader booklets. I'm not 100% certain on that, but this one is using up yarn that I use for a similar sort of project. A couple of years ago I knit the Gnarled Oak cardigan by Alana Dacos, and I used this yarn, which is Schackenmeyer Extra Merino, and I have quite a lot of this left over. When I knit the Gnarled Oak cardigan, I managed to get gauge. I struggled, but the cardigan itself, the gauge is quite tight. I mean, not super tight, but it's, you know, relatively tight. It hasn't got a lot of drape to it, even though it's quite a drapey yarn. So what I was thinking, the pattern is knit in a sport weight, but with a 26 stitch to 4-inch gauge, and that to me is quite tight. Even on a fingering weight I would normally only knit a 24 stitch gauge, and a sport weight I would argue was closer to a DK than to a fingering weight, and a DK weight I wouldn't knit anything tighter than normally a 21 stitch gauge. So what I plan to do is knit the praline with this, which is a DK weight, and I will knit it at a DK weight gauge. Now the cardigan, the size range is not brilliant because it is an older pattern, and I think the bust size only goes up to around 51.5 inches, 51.5 inches, sorry, not 41.5, which is fine. It would be big enough for my bust size, but knitting at a looser gauge means that I'm going to be able to you can up the size range. I'll still probably only knit the larger sizes at the most on my looser gauge, but it does mean that you can expand the range of knitting patterns sometimes that are, especially older ones that are of a smaller range and maybe don't go quite so high, is knitting at a looser gauge or on a bigger yarn can sometimes work out quite well to be able to increase the size range. You got to be careful with your depth of garments, but I've had, you know, not complete failures. I've had the odd one where I've had to backtrack, but most of the time it works out fairly well. My Bly cardigan would be a very good example of that, which I think is knit on a, it's either a DK weight maybe originally. I knit that in an Aran weight yarn, and I knit that on a 7mm needle, I think. Yeah, 7mm needle, but the original pattern is obviously much smaller, but it's made a nice big oversized throw over everything cardigan, which lives on the back of the sofa and I can throw on top of anything else, which is great. Sometimes you can adapt patterns quite easily just by changing your gauge. So that's the plan for the praline, and it is an all over textured sweater, cardigan rather, I will be steeking it rather than knitting it flat. And whereas when I did the spike, this one has like all of a texture on the body and on the sleeves, and I hated doing it, but I have learnt since doing this how to do cabling without a needle. Although this one was just, you didn't really have to use a cable needle for this, but you had to kind of manipulate the needles a bit. But for the praline, the texture on it looks relatively straightforward to be able to do without a cable needle, which is one of the things I really hate about cabling. So that is quite a way down my list of make 9 now. It's certainly not a priority. A couple of weeks ago, or maybe it's just before, was it just before, just after Christmas, I was watching a video by Darling Desi, and in it she was kind of getting ready for kind of a snowy day. The very aesthetic videos, I don't know. Anyway, on this video she was getting herself ready to go out, and the sweater she was wearing I noticed, and it was a oversized v-neck sweater, like a beige colour sweater in a boucle yarn, and that has never been on my radar ever. But I saw it and I thought, do you know what, that would be a good throw over sweater, nice neutral throw over sweater that would work really well in my wardrobe. So I've decided I need one of those. So what I plan to do is knit probably the Ori Sweater by Audrey, oh, what's her second name? Audrey Borrego, who's a French designer, and I really like a lot of her patterns. And I plan to use just alpaca boucle, which is a drops alpaca boucle, which is a 80% alpaca, 15% wool, 5% polyamide blend yarn, and it is this kind of beigey colour. It's actually a little bit more of a cooler beige in person and slightly darker than it's showing up on camera. I was trying to photo this for my stash photos for Ravelry earlier this month, and I could not get, I had to use a lot of colour correct to get it close to what it actually is. It's kind of, it's more like this colour, like it's looking here, but it looks a lot paler when you bring it close to the camera. Anyway, so I'm planning on making an oversized version of the Ori sweater. In fact, I intend to knit a couple of versions of the Ori sweater. I would like to, oh, I will show you some more yarns for that in a moment. My camera just went off there. As I was saying, what was the thing? I plan on knitting the Ori without the patterning, which is on the sleeves. It has seed stitch panels down the sleeve, but with a boucle yarn it's not going to show up, and besides I want to keep this fairly neutral. But I do wish to knit another version of the Ori sweater in a different yarn, because I do like the design of the sweater, and again as a kind of a cozy sweater. The other yarn I would like to knit the sweater in is with my own hand dyed yarns, in a speckle yarn. So this is Carnation, which is a, I know it's like burgundy and pink and kind of mustardy gold speckles in it, held double with a undyed mohair silk yarn. The original pattern is for a fingering weight with a mohair held double, and I think this will be really nice, be light coloured, nice, and just a bit of interest and texture in there, and that will be with the seed stitching down the sleeves, maybe with a bit of waist shaping in it rather than too oversized, a little bit more fitted, but we shall see. Another design I would like to do with my own hand dyed yarns is the Nordiska sweater. This one has been in my library since the pattern came out basically, and I have kind of ummed and ahed on what yarns to use. I've seen a few more slightly rustic ones with autumnal colours and such like, but I keep coming back to using these yarns. This one is a BFL nylon in the colourway Slate. This is one of my hand dyed, botanically dyed yarns, because I botanically dye yarns. I'm looking at the screen instead of the lens, I do apologise. I hand dye yarns botanically, but I also acid dye yarn. So this is a botanically dyed yarn. So this one is in Slate, this one is in Moonstone, and they are both on a BFL nylon base. And then I keep trying to decide whether I should use a kind of a bluey purple in the colourwork, because it has two contrast colours. But I've also held a commercial yarn in kind of a palest, kind of a buff pink with these two, and I quite like that too, but I need to swatch the colourwork and see what it looks like. Let me just grab that yarn to show you. This is the other yarn I was thinking about, and I just think that kind of bluey grey and that pinky colour and that beige look really nice together. This is King Cole Merino blend in the colourway Rose Gold, and I'm hoping to knit an entire cardigan with that one day. I bought one ball to see what the colour was like, and I really like those colours together. They're not really colours I would normally choose to wear, but I just really like the combination. So I may go with that rather than that, because I don't wear a lot of blue, although I guess you could class this as more purple than blue. But I just think that, or that, I don't know, I just think that looks really, really pretty. So that is, woof, juggling, that is the Nordiska sweater. Finally, we have the notable mentions, and there are various reasons they didn't make the Make 9. First of all, I was restricted to 9, and secondly, there's just a few different things. One of them I've kind of already cast on, just, and another I don't have all the yarn for. So let me just quickly whiz through these. First up is one I'm not going to be able to pronounce, but the Skagfjall, bear with me, Skagfjall, by Diana Waller, and it is a colourwork yoked sweater, which I think now I may steek and turn into a cardigan, because it is quite a heavyweight sweater, and I just don't wear that many bulky sweaters. A bulky cardigan, yes, but not so much a bulky sweater. So the colours I'm using are these three, with the main body of the sweater or cardigan being this burgundy colour, and the colourwork being done in these two over here. The yarns are upside down, but the yarns are, those two are drops Alaska and this one drops Nepal. Again, I've had this yarn for a few years now. A lot of these, the drops ones, I've had for quite a few years now, and were always intended for these projects. So yeah, this has been sitting in my stash for quite a while with the pattern. I did cast on the top rib on this, and actually, looking at it, I think I've cast this on to be a cardigan anyway. No, I haven't. I've cast it on as a full rib. So all I've done is do the rib. So I will frog that out, and instead of knitting it in the round, I will knit the rib back and forth, and then I will knit the yoke in the round with steek stitches included. And yeah, it'll be a nice warm cardigan that I can throw on. Again, like my Bly, it can go on over the top of other things. Keep me nice and toasty warm, but without feeling claustrophobic with having a bulky, thick sweater on, which my husband really likes, me not so much. Next, I'm going to test my ability to speak Gaelic, which I can't, because although I live in Scotland, I am not Scottish, I'm English. And I live on the Orkney Islands, where they don't speak Gaelic. That's a fun fact. Orkney and Shetland, although they are islands off the coast of Scotland, or off the north coast of Scotland, and up until a few hundred years ago weren't actually owned by Scotland, they were owned by Norway. So Orkney doesn't have any kind of, well, it has Scottish heritage, but it's not like Gaelic and Celtic and all that sort of thing up in Orkney. It's more Nordic. So you have a lot of Norse name places and traditions and such like, and they don't speak Gaelic in the Northern Isles, whereas they do in the Western Isles. So I don't get any practice to speak Gaelic. I get practice to speak Orcadian, which is not Gaelic, trust me. So the shawl I would like to knit with these two yarns is the let me refer, it's the Ishnik, Nick should rhyme with Dreek, Ishnik Shawl by Lucy Haig. I think Lucy Haig is actually from Orkney. She used to live in Orkney anyway. So these yarns I bought at Edinburgh Yarn Festival a few years ago. They are both by Old Maiden Ant, and they are both a 50% superwash merino, 50% silk base. I fell in love with this skein of yarn. It is stunningly beautiful. It is just gorgeous. I love it. I love a rainbow yarn, but I don't really wear rainbow colours. But a muted one, oh, I really, really like. But I don't buy single skeins unless they're for something like socks, or very, very rarely. So I found a yarn that would complement but is at the same time contrasting on the same base. It took me ages to choose which one, and I went with this one, and I plan to do the cabling panel on the shawl with this colourway, which is Midnight Owl, and all the rest of the contrasting in this multicoloured variegated yarn, which is fully completely. And yeah, I think it'll be absolutely beautiful, pilly as hell, but super duper soft and absolutely gorgeous. Another notable mention is the Throw Over Cardigan by Andrea Mowry. I really like this, and there is the there's another one as well. There's the is it the Throwback Cardigan even? It's the Throwback Cardigan and the Throw Over Sweater. They're basically both the same design, except one's a cardigan, one's a sweater. So I will have to look at the fitting of them both and choose which one I want, because even if I choose the cardigan, I will be knitting it in the round and steeking it. The yarns that she uses for the contrast is Spin Cycle yarns, which Spin Cycle is basically yarn that looks like hand spun yarn, which is perfect if you can't spin yarn. You can get hand spun yarn, or yarn that looks like hand spun yarn, without actually spinning it yourself. Words. But I can spin yarn, and I do spin yarn, and I have hand spun yarn in my stash. So I would like to use this skein of yarn. Again, this is by the braid that I bought was from Created by LCB, which there is no other dyer that I found anything like Created by LCB, but unfortunately she's in America, and import fees to the UK are pretty high, so I don't order very often. And I have a lot of fibre in stash. I haven't ordered any for quite a while, but I can highly recommend. This colourway is called Bonnie, and it is a one-of-a-kind skein again, and it is on 100% Rambouillet, and I really love Rambouillet. I love any of the squishy kind of fibres like Rambouillet or Targy, the kind of squishy and kind of marshmallowy, and they're beautiful to spin with. So this for the contrast, but I don't have any yarn for the main body of the cardigan, or none that I have in stash that I have in mind, so I would either have to reallocate some yarn that I already have for another project for the main body, or I would have to either spin the main body yarn, possible, maybe. I have quite a bit of fibre, not sure if I've got enough for a whole sweater in one colour, mind, or I would have to buy some more yarn for the body, and I'm not sure what colour I would like to do yet. I quite like the original colour that she knit the Throwback Cardigan in, which is kind of a coppery, like a dark coppery browny colour. I really, really like it, so I may have to find something very similar in that. Maybe in Gilead yarn. Maybe Gilead's got a colour that would be suitable, because that's kind of got that same kind of plump squishiness to it. Might do that. There's an idea. So there's that. And speaking of Gilead yarn, another pattern that didn't quite make it, which I would like to make in the future, is the Silver Forest sweater, which I do have the pattern for. Again, I need the yarn for it. But I'm hoping to knit that in the thinner version of the Gilead yarn, which is the Ulysse, I think it is pronounced, which is more of a sport weight yarn, whereas the Gilead is a worsted weight yarn. And it is a woolen spun, 100% merino, I think, yarn from France, and it is lovely. It's got that squishiness that you get from some of the plumper yarns, like Rambouillet, or like let's think, Corriedale or Polworth. They've got more of a bounce to them, whereas merino tends to be quite smooth and flat. But the merino, when it's woolen spun, gets that bounce to it. But most merino yarns are worsted spun, which is nice and smooth and shiny. So Silver Forest, Jennifer Steingers is that designer who designed that one. And yeah, hopefully in the future, because I have a few of Jennifer Steingers' patterns. In fact, another one of hers didn't make the Make 9. And I have the fibre, the yarn to hand. That design, which is the last one I'm going to talk about today actually, is the Arboreal sweater. And that is a DK weight colourwork yoke sweater again. And the reason I didn't make the Make 9 is because I would like to say I've already cast it on, but I haven't. But I have swatched for it and it is ready to go. And I'll be casting that on probably in the next week, maybe. We shall see, because I have 3 garments already on the needles. But I do have the yarn for that, and I have swatched for that. So, well, I haven't done the colourway, but I've swatched the yarn base. This is the yarn I plan to use. This is the blocked swatch, which has come out really nice, and the colour is, oh, so delicious. It is Drops Soft Tweed, which I believe is the equivalent of Knit Picks tweed, one of their tweeds, but it's DK weight one, and the colours are the equivalents as well. This is Carrot Cake, which I believe is the equivalent of Habanero, and this is Cookie Dough, which I have no idea what the equivalent is in the Knit Picks, but it is a cool beige colour. But this colour, so nice. It is a superfine alpaca merino and viscose blend. It has a very strange feel to it when you're knitting with it. It's almost got a feel like when you're knitting cotton. It's kind of got that must be the viscose in it, or the fibres from the viscose, because obviously that's going to be the tweed, but it must be in the yarn itself as well, because it's got that kind of feel that you often get with a cotton blend. It's almost got like I don't know, it's got like I can't explain it, like it's like knitting with paper, which doesn't make any sense, but it's the only way I can describe it. It's kind of got it's not stiff like a cardboard or a paper. It's just kind of got like you know, like handmade paper. It's got, like, if you run your hand down, it's got like a fuzzy kind of a texture to it. This kind of feels like that. It doesn't block up like that. It blocks up really nice. It's nice and soft. But I don't know, I think it's the sound it makes when you run your fingers over it. It kind of reminds me. So that is the last project I'm talking about, both on my Make 9 and the projects and designs of note. So I'm going to say goodbye for now. If you're new here, then hi, thank you for watching through to the end. This is, like I said, this is not my usual content. It's close, but usually it's a knitting, crafting podcast. And if you're a regular viewer, then thank you for watching through to the end. You are very much appreciated. And I shall speak to you probably next week for another episode on the channel. Okay, bye-bye.